Hey guys, so I haven't played with Raider in probably a couple of years, so I wanted to specifically play with Raider, and only then decided to play with Blast Rain. So this class is not the best for Blast Rain, but it is still pretty decent. As you're gonna see later, damage against Shaper was pretty decent, and in perfect situation it would be about 800,000 Shaper DPS. I'm not exactly sure how much because I didn't really care to calculate everything exactly, and Path of Building does not calculate everything. Let's just say it's more than enough to defeat Shaper. However, the build itself, even though it has over 5.5 thousand life and a lot of dodge, it does still feel a bit squishy. And I would often have to sidestep the projectiles and dangerous attacks and not just rely on my dodge. And some may not like Blast Rain AoE because the clear speed is not that amazing with this Blast Rain AoE, but for me it felt pretty okayish. That's why you also see I have Herald of Ice for extra explosions and extra clear speed. Also, while I was making this build, it did not seem that expensive because I crafted most of the items myself and I only bought a couple of uniques and a couple other items. But after I defeated Shaper and price checked all of my items and combined the cost of all of them, if you wanted to make this build from scratch without any other items, it would cost you about 12 exalts. But you could still make this build with way cheaper items and still end up with enough damage for Shaper. And I do have very expensive buff that I crafted myself. However, you could get way more damage with Chinsol. Again, however, the Chinsol is not that good for clear speed because it gains all the damage from being close to enemies. But you don't really need all that damage for clear speed and you could just use Chinsol for Shaper only. Another thing that I didn't like about this build is having frenzy charges. Yeah, no, going Raider and then complaining about having to maintain frenzy charges. But it is pretty important to have maximum frenzy charges before going into the Shaper or Elder fight, because otherwise it may take more than a couple attacks to get maximum frenzy charges. That's why for Shaper's Guidance and Shaper I was using the most boring boots in the game, Ralakesh Impatience boots. While standing still, every second you generate random charge, and pray that you generate frenzy charge as soon as possible. Or just take a sip of coffee, relax, maybe read a book or watch a movie, then quickly swap your boots and go for the fight. And you will see swapping my boots during the Shaper fight because all those phases are very annoying for any charge builds, but I did manage somehow to defeat Shaper deathless. Not that it is an achievement these days, but still. So I'm gonna talk about my items, skills, links, and passive skill tree. As always, in video description you will find timestamps, other information, Path of Building import code, and also keep in mind that in Path of Building it does not calculate everything, like Mirage Archer adds another about 30% more damage, Helmet Enchantment is also not calculated, and if you check notes from imported Path of Building, you can also find out how much I paid for each of my items, if you want to plan this build. Anyway, let's get into this build. And starting with above, like I said, I crafted myself with Prismatic Fossil and it did take more than a couple tries. It is Shaped Harbinger Bow because I wanted more crit, I wanted more attack speed and to roll elemental damage for attacks. And elemental damage which can roll up to 120, which also does affect Herald of Ice explosions. I think it's always more fun to try and craft rare items when use uniques, but you can definitely use Chinsol which would give you more DPS, but only if you are standing right next to the enemies. Or you could use Lion Eyes Glare, which would also give you more DPS than this bow, but you would have less critical strike chance. And in my bow I have Spell Totem with Scorching Ray, faster casting and also Herald of Ice, because I didn't have anywhere else to place Herald of Ice. Then a helmet with the Blast Rain enchantment, and this enchantment is pretty important, it does give a lot of DPS. And this helmet also reduces enemy fire resistance by 9%. It's not that important, just get the helmet enchantment with some other decent mods like maximum life resistances. And in my helmet I have Anger, Orb of Storm with power charge on crit and increased critical strike support. Orb of Storm is only for the bosses when I want to get a couple more power charges to get a bit more crit chance. And you may want to have this especially if you're not using a high crit chance bow. You may even want to grab another power charge node from the passive skill tree nearby shadow area. Next, my quiver, I also wanted more projectile speed because projectile speed and attack speed reduces the delay between firing Blast Rain and actually dealing damage with it. But if you got faster attacking bow, you may not need projectile speed on quiver. I was just trying to get more damage like crit multiplier, elemental damage with attacks, and of course life and couple resistances. And while leveling I was using Drill Neck, but I'm not entirely convinced that Drill Neck actually works because Blast Rain does not actually shoot projectile and the explosions are not actually projectiles well, I guess they are still arrows, but they can't really pierce, so I'm not really sure if it works. It does say that it works in pathway building. Anyway, that's not the point. You can still use drill neck while leveling, or even use it in the end game setup, but I really wanted more critical strike chance and some quality of life improvement with the projectile speed. Then for the body armor, I decided to go with Shroud of Lightless. You could actually use Elder Base body armor with attack crit chance, but of course that would be more expensive because you first would need to get decent body armor and then to 6 link it. And Shroud of Lightless gives you 37 elemental penetration, and the links inside it are Blast Rain, elemental damage with attacks, Immolate, Combustion, and Mirage Archer, and I do swap Combustion to Conk Effect for a bit more damage. With Conk Effect, Blast Rain has 20 radius, without it 24, and I have no AoE scaling from the passive skill tree. Next I have 2-sucker Thumb Fist, and I got these 2 Abyss Jewels from my previous builds that I crafted myself with a perfect life roll and a bit more damage. So if you went full damage, you can definitely squeeze in a lot more damage on Abyssal Jewels. And I have Poacher's Mark inside these corrupted Thumb Fist. Poacher's Mark is actually pretty nice, and I wanted to get Poacher's Mark on hit ring, but I just couldn't get it, so I just crafted some opal ring. Then the belt also from the previous build, and this belt could be a bit expensive with a lot of elemental damage with attacks, decent life resistances, and I got a fair Abyss Jewel with perfect life roll and a bit damage. As you can see, I was trying to get as much life as I can on Abyss Jewels. Next, my boots, I also bought these because I wanted attack dodge rather than spell dodge, but you could use like Aziri's Step if you wanted more spell dodge than attack dodge, of course if you can balance your resistances. And in my boots I have Blink Arrow linked with faster attacks and Culling Strike, and Ice Golem in unlinked socket because I did not want to increase its mana cost. And I could not place my Ice Golem inside the bow because it is linked with Spell Totem, and this means each time I swap my boots to generate power charges and frenzy charges, I would have to summon my Ice Golem again. Next, my ring. One of the ring is not that expensive opal ring, just life resistances and a bit of damage, and another one is a bit more expensive with double elemental damage, I guess. As for the amulet, is nothing too special. It does have pretty decent life and attributes, which I do need strength and a bit more int. And then life resistances, elemental damage with attacks, flat elemental damage, or critical multiplier. As for the flask, I'm really not comfortable running just one life flask, but these 3 following flasks are kind of mandatory. Quartz Flask for dodge, Wise Oak for more damage and a bit of elemental damage mitigation, and Diamond Flask for more critical strike chance. And then obviously Quicksilver Flask, which I guess you could replace, either use Aziri's Promise or just a second life flask. Now onto the passive skill tree. Starting with Ascendancy points, first I took Way of the Poacher to generate frenzy charges, and then went with Quartz Infusion to get dodge and phasing as soon as possible. Then from Merciless Frenzy node, and finally Avatar of the Veil to get more damage, movement speed, elemental ailment, immunity while phasing, and more spell dodge. And from the passive skill tree, obviously I grabbed all the frenzy nodes and other useful stuff near them. Also, since this build needs a lot of intelligence, I had to use Fertile Mind in here, and you may actually want to grab that early on. But first, from the passive skill tree, I traveled to the down and left towards the duelist area, getting point blank and traveling towards the projectile damage node, because early on it's not really important to get crit chance and only start stacking crit chance later on. You may want to grab this Primeval Force because it does give a ton of damage, and also jewel sockets are not that important early on because only high item level Abyss Jewels have good stats, and I believe I started getting frenzy charges only later on once I did the Merciless Lab. And once I kind of finished my passive skill tree at near the duelist area, I did rush to the phase acrobatics. Oh, you also may be thinking about Liona's full unique jewel, which may be a bit expensive, but you could use it inside this jewel socket and benefit from these claw nodes, which gives you crit chance. And Liona's full unique jewel would convert those claw nodes into bow nodes. But in the end I decided I don't really want to do that. It's not actually giving me that much more crit chance, and I would rather just spend points on just raw damage. But if you wanted to push this build above level 90, then you could definitely consider using this. And once I took phase acrobatics, I started traveling towards the shadow area to get more crit, life leech, then grabbed 1 mana leech, and until then I was using Thief's Torment ring, because otherwise Blast Rain does cost quite a bit of mana and it may be difficult to sustain it, unless you get like Elder Ring with mana and life gain on hit, or Poacher's Mark on hit ring, or couple normal jewels with mana gain on hit, but turns out those jewels can be very expensive. And then last couple levels I took Force of Nature and these life evasion nodes. Oh, and the jewel socket at the bottom of the skill tree, and I'm using Watcher's Eye with crit multiplier multiplier while affected by anger aura. And that pretty much covers my passive skill tree. Now as for my next build, I'm actually gonna be doing cast and dev build. Yep, it's gonna happen. Obviously I will not be using that for leveling, I'm gonna only be using it against big bosses, so we'll see, that should be interesting. Anyway, thank you for watching and see you soon.